Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the Moors of Castlerock information event. So what I'd like to do this evening is go over what we've been up to the past year on the site and what our plans are for the rest of this summer. So the Moors of Castlerock is a site you can see here to the left of the caravan park, this almost triangular shaped site. So the site historically was part of the wider downhill domain, but it's now within ownership of Causey Coast and Glens Borough Council, who we've been working with contractors to do work on the site over last summer and this upcoming summer. So why are the Moors special? Really, they're a unique habitat because of their aspect to the sea. They have quite a high salinity and wind for most of the year, and this does create an environment for specialist plants and animals, such as some priority species of Northern Irish butterfly, birds, and formerly it would have been home to the Northern Ireland's only native reptile, the common lizard. But because of encroaching bracken and scrub, a lot of these species can no longer adapt to that habitat. So the current issues really, as I've stated, are the encroaching bracken and scrubs, which is resulting in habitat loss for some of the species that I spoke about. In a natural system, this would be likely graze and create a more tussocky, patchy habitat, which favours those species. The bracken really is outcompeting the native species on the site, which have kind of been pushed to the periphery. So you will see heather and bilberry closer to the cliff edge, but in the lee of that slope, it's allowed this bracken to dominate the site. So the conservation plan for the site, so as I said, 25-acre site is ownership of Causey Coast and Glens Borough Council. We have been doing some work last summer on the treatment of the bracken and also making the site a bit more accessible through stone steps, which you may have seen if you're up there. We also will be putting in interpretation panels once we have the rest of the work done on the site. So what you can see there in red is the existing access, which will be maintained when the work on the site is finished. So last August, with Hilltop Landscape, our contractors, we did some stone pitching. So previously, a lot of these pathways were just like mudslides with a few sporadic stones. So we took stones from the site and had some brought in to create a bit more safe and accessible pitching. So we added a few stones in, which are bedding in quite nicely, and it just makes it a wee bit more accessible, but still keeping it quite a natural look. The stone wall that runs down the site, so instead of putting in a fence there for cattle grazing, we decided we would use that wall as a stock retaining wall. So there were maybe 5 or 6 sections, about a metre each, that we needed to patch. So Hilltop Landscapes repaired those for us, and when that rock weathers down, it will not really be noticeable. So the big thing we did last summer was the bracken control. So these images were taken about July time last year when the bracken was fully grown, and it probably was up to about my waist. So it really was quite dominant on the site and nothing else could come through. So we started off a program of treatment initially through volunteers. So last August, we had a group from Ulster Wildlife who were with us for a week-long residential. So we had them out one morning, all 25 of them, with mop shafts, bashing the bracken. So we did that with them in the morning and then a community group in the afternoon. Later that same week, we also had Victor Scott and his Clydesdale Shane. So they're from Gleevley Clydesdales, just outside Drumcerne, who still practice traditional methods of horsemanship. So Victor came with Shane and rolled the bracken for us, which was quite effective as well. The only issue being that it was quite labour intensive, and I think after 20 minutes, Victor had enough. That morning we also did a BBC Live interview with BBC Ulster, so it was really nice to have the sound of the horse in the background and be able to tell people about what was going on the site. So here is about a week after the treatment, just an example of the comparison of bashing and rolling. So on the right hand side is the bracken that's been bashed through our volunteers and their mop shafts, and then on the left it was the rolling with the Clydesdale. And that was just before spraying in September of last year. So the bashing was maybe a bit more effective because it breaks the stems, whereas the rolling flattens. But both are reasonably effective. If it's on a site where you don't want to use any chemical treatment, it would be effective, but it is quite labour intensive, so it wouldn't be something I would choose for a large area. So after this, the whole site was sprayed, and so far we're not seeing much return of the bracken, but it is only May, so there's time yet. So the next step in the process is really getting cows onto the site. So we will be fencing the area in the next couple of weeks. But why do we use cows? We like cows because they're a generalist grazer and they're not too fussy, and because we'll be using a native breed in this site, they're quite hardy and resilient to that kind of winter conditions up there. So it's not just through their grazing, it's through their trampling and kind of pushing about through the scrub that creates this mosaic and sort of patchy habitat that's important for some of those priority species I talked about. Cows also kind of tend to pull the grass and they don't want to eat it down as close as sheep would with their front teeth. So it gives opportunities for more of those small specialist plants to come up through. So we will be putting in stock-proof fencing. So just this Tuesday, we awarded the tender to Pat McSorley. So work will be commencing around about the first week of June and should take about 2 weeks. So this fencing is to the Department of Environment standards. So it's sheep wire, 2 runs of barbed wire on the top, and then a run of flat bull wire on the outside, just to protect people if they happen to brush against the fence, if they're not catching themselves in the barbed wire. Access across the paddock will be maintained, so during the grazing season you still can walk across the paddock when there's cattle present. And as far as we know, the council are permitting dogs at this time on leads during the grazing season, and hopefully we can continue to let people and dogs access their site without too much issue. The site also has archaeological significance. So this was identified by Christian Gareth Bairn, who grew up in Castlerock. It's a passage grave, so if you're familiar with the kind of the stones to the top of the cliff, this was a Neolithic burial site which is approximately 5,000 years old. It would have been constructed of large upright stones and a top capstone which is now collapsed into the grave, and it would have formed a burial chamber for perhaps multiple people. Now this is not unique to the North Coast. There are some in White Park Bay and along the Causeway Coast, and we think that this might be one of a series along the North Coast. Also, because we're grazing the site, this may unearth some other things that have been hidden by the bracken, because it's not often these things are in isolation, so we don't know what else we might find as we graze the site. So finally, I'd just like to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about the site or want to get involved in any way, you can contact me by email, or you can keep up to date on our social media and website. Thank you very much.